joining, and I know this will be posted later if anyone knows of other students that cannot make it live tonight. So welcome to LSAT Unplugged. My name is Elena Lucero. I work as a TA for Steve. And I also want to give formal introduction to Dean Mercado at UC Davis. And Dean Mercado, if you would like to give just a little bit of background about yourself, and let's be a moment.
Sure. So thanks so much for having me. My name is Kristen Mercado. I am the Assistant Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid at UC Davis School of Law in California. So we are one of the 5 UC law schools. So Davis, just for those of you who don't know, we are the only one that's not in a major city or along the coast. So we have a little bit more of a small college town kind of feel to it. It's a great school, smaller. I've been there, actually just celebrated my 10th anniversary. Tomorrow will be the official 10th anniversary, but I really love it. It's a great school. And I've been very happy to make it my home for the last 10 years. And I look forward to your questions and telling you more about law school and Davis and whatever else might be on your mind.
Definitely. Thank you. My hometown, I'm from Northern California. So my hometown's Yuba City, and I love the campus of UC Davis and the town. So I encourage anyone to look up UC Davis, visit if you can. But also if anyone has any questions throughout the night, feel free to submit them in the chat and we'll go ahead and answer them and address them when the time comes, because I have plenty of questions and several topics to go over. So feel free to submit those as they come to mind. So first off, I wanted to address UC Davis in general, just because I was reading online that you were named, let's see, number 3 in the US and number 1 in California in terms of racial justice in your department. And so I just wanted to hear your thoughts about what differentiates and helps make UC Davis successful in addressing that field of law and just field in general.
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. So I think one of the things that's been really important, and it's been, I know for me, very motivating over the course of this, really challenging year and beyond, honestly, but definitely over this past year, is having folks in leadership who really kind of don't just sort of talk the talk, but really walk the walk. And so our dean, Kevin Johnson, I think partially because of his own personal background, he's a first generation student, comes from very humble means. And he really values diversity in all the ways that you can define it. So, certainly racial, ethnic diversity, but also, socioeconomic diversity, having, diverse perspectives in terms of, different political views, right? Coming from different parts of the country, sort of valuing and really including people. And so I think when your dean sort of makes that a priority, just as much as, attracting really impressive and accomplished faculty, or, meeting certain metrics and maintaining, a certain spot in the rankings and all of those things that kind of are the more, I guess, sort of traditional markers maybe of what makes for a quality law school, but you see the role of diversity as being equally important. I think that translates, and you see that echoed through all different parts of our community. So, we have a majority minority faculty for a top 40 law school. That's exceedingly rare. So that means more than half of our faculty are individuals of color. Half our faculty are women. We have LGBTQ folks on the faculty. We have, people who are first generation college students, quite a few first generation law school graduates. So there's really diversity in the classroom by virtue of having diverse faculty. So not everyone is coming from, a set part of the country with a set background and going to just a select few schools. We also have faculty who have actually, been out in the world doing things. And I think that they bring that experience into the classroom. And so I think that changes the dynamic in the classroom in terms of classroom discussions. They bring current issues. And over the past year, that's been really important to acknowledge the role that law can have in terms of transforming and bringing equity, but also the ways in which law hasn't always has been, sort of a hindrance for folks. Certain groups of people haven't always received, equitable treatment. And so I think it's important to, have those diverse perspectives. In turn, I think that's what draws a diverse student body, right? Students want to see not just people that look like them or come from a similar background, but people who are different from them as well. And so I think students choose Davis because they do like to see that there's a range of backgrounds and perspectives in their faculty and their classmates. And as they progress and go out in the world in their alumni network, right? And so I think those are things that have allowed us to weather what's been, a challenging year through, really embracing our community and doing things. We've had a racial justice speaker series throughout this year. We've held opportunities for town halls during at the very beginning of the year to welcome our new students. We did a community read, which was great because it included like all class years, our new students, our faculty, alumni, staff, everyone was involved in that. It was a chance to talk about, issues that were really kind of facing the country. And I think that that type of inclusive activity where, we really focus on being a community, not just of students and faculty, but also thinking about our staff and our alumni and our geographic community, right? I think that makes us strong and made this year, allowed us to still thrive in a really challenging environment. And it's a big part of the reason why I've been proud to be a part of the Davis community for the last 10 years.
Definitely acknowledging how much is going on campus, and I'm sure how much is going on right now in the admissions office. I want to, again, thank you for your time, because I understand that the office might be a little bit busy. I know that the admissions cycle stems out, and we're nearing, I believe, we're nearing April. And so right now, how are things in the admissions office and receiving applications, as much as you can disclose?
Sure. So like most law schools in the country, we had a very busy cycle in terms of the volume of applications. And we saw a lot of really strong applicants this cycle. We our deadline is a little bit later than some other schools. It's in mid-March, and so we've actually just kind of wrapped up in terms of receiving applications. But we've of course been reading and admitting since October, to be honest. But we're at the stage now where we're sort of tapering down in terms of admitting and really focusing on building up a strong wait list. It's been a tough cycle. It's great to have so many amazing choices in terms of who might be our future members of the class of 2024. It does honestly make for really hard choices though, because there's a lot of people that we would love to admit, and in another year we would absolutely admit. But we just have a lot of applicants, and we are not planning on growing our class size. So it does make for some tough choices. There's also, for us on the admission side, there's a little bit of uncertainty, right? We're not 100% sure how folks are feeling, how applicants are feeling about starting law school this fall. There's still a lot of uncertainty in the world, and people's lives are still, people are having a lot of challenges that have nothing to do with their educational pursuits, right? And so, there's some uncertainty for us in just kind of knowing for sure exactly what people will decide. Will they decide the number of people we expect to accept their offers? Will that actually happen? Or will we be off a bit in our predictions? And, we can't say exactly what we think. We can sort of make an educated guess about fall and exactly what it'll look like in the classroom, but we don't know for certain. So there's some uncertainty that kind of fluctuates in there too. But I would never, I would never be sad about saying that I had a really amazing applicant pool this year and that my job was tough, because it's a really lovely problem to have. It's been great to see the enthusiasm that people have for law, because I think that it's such a versatile and valuable education. And I've been excited to see people really, in their personal statements and in talking with them, even though we've done everything virtual, we did, recruit in the fall. And, so I've had a chance to talk to folks and just hearing people's enthusiasm for the idea of embracing legal education as a way to really make change in their world. And so that's really, inspiring and motivational for me, because, I think that, and I know sometimes it's hard when you're immersed in the application process to kind of keep that long view. So it's been great to see that energy from applicants, and I'm excited to see what students, what our future law students are going to do, because there's a lot of great ideas and a lot of enthusiasm right now. So yeah, it's been a busy but good cycle.
That sounds amazing. Speaking to just in general, the law school admissions application timeline as a whole, I've noticed now among the community of candidates that there's certain chat rooms, perhaps Reddit, that students sometimes look to project a timeline. How would you advise students in kind of balancing, not comparing yourselves to other prospective applicants, because I know that it's tough for some students to see online that somebody with the same numbers is getting a decision before them. And so how does the admissions team kind of address that if it comes up?
Right. So I think Reddit and similar forums can be great in giving you really broad strokes for maybe what's happening, really larger trends. So, if you maybe were seeing a lot of people talking about, I'm really trying to get my applications in, by early November, or whatever was kind of early for them, right? You may have seen more of that than in past years, right? And so it could be helpful in that sense. I think for broad stroke trends, those are good. But when it comes to particular schools, I really kind of encourage people to take what they read with a bit of a grain of salt, and to just contact schools. Honestly, that's why we're here, is to answer those types of questions. Everybody has a slightly different process. Some schools, for example, for us, we use a 2-stage review. So myself and our 2 directors, we read all of the applications that come in cover to cover, but then they have to go to an admissions committee that signs off on our proposed decisions. And so, we move a little bit slower, and depending on, I read a bit faster than my 2 directors, and one of the directors reads faster than the other, right? So if you're in someone's queue and they're a little bit slower, or they had a busier week and they didn't read as many files, right? You can quickly, even if we may distribute the files roughly in the order in which they're completed, that doesn't necessarily mean you're all going to flow through at the exact time. For us, if a committee member says, if we recommend waitlisting someone and they disagree, that file gets set aside, and the committee comes back to it later. So that person might have applied in September but not get a decision until February. That had they still get admitted, but if you were kind of compulsively checking the blogs and going off of what all of the other people who didn't end up actually getting pulled from the waitlist by the committee, the proposed waitlist, and put onto the admit list, you would be having really negative anxiety about that. But if you contact us, we can try to tell you kind of where we are with things, give you some expectation of when you might hear. We can't always do that, but I think schools in general want you to be more informed and rely on them for information about their particular process, rather than relying on what you read on a blog. Because as much as I know it's difficult to really feel like you can trust us when we say that honestly, the decision-making process is about more than just your numbers, it really is. And so because it is about more than just your numbers, you can't just use your numbers to gauge what you should expect in the process, right? Because if that were the case, then what would be the point in having you do the rest of the application, right? We would just put your numbers into a system and spit out the offers, and we would go by order of date you submitted your numbers, and there would be no real evaluation. So allow for the human part of the process to sometimes inject a little bit of unevenness in terms of when you hear, or whether your file is goes under evaluation or is still awaiting evaluation, and all of those things. And the last thing I would say is, as much as Reddit and some of those other sites can be good, because I know a lot of times people try to be helpful by posting a list of, here's what the email says if you got admitted, right? Look for the subject line or whatever it might be. It's also really important to read each school's status check site, or their equivalent of their status check site, because most of them actually give you some pretty good information to kind of know what to expect when you go on there and you see a piece of information. Well, what is that? Okay, awaiting evaluation, what does that mean? We try to provide that information. It does require you to take a minute and kind of read through it. But again, we're really trying to give you as much information as we can, because we know that it's a really hard process to kind of put your life out there to be judged. And so we want to try to be as transparent as we can, with what we know at the time you ask. But if you don't ask us, we can't tell you. So I think websites are great, blogs are great for kind of general trends, but really when it comes to a specific school and what might be happening with your application there, it's always best to go to the source.
Yes, I definitely agree. Contacting schools would definitely be more accurate than checking an online website. Speaking of submissions, I know that UC Davis offers an early decision program, and there's specific deadlines, and there's, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, a scholarship tied to that program. But what other roles does that play in terms of, does it offer an advantage? Is it a significantly smaller pool of applicants? Or is it a better position for you to go, or a path for you to go for, if you're 100% committed to UC Davis, because it is a binding decision program?
Right, so ours is a binding early decision. And if you apply by November 1st, it's just a question you check on the application. So it's not a different application process, but you just let us know, yes, I want to be considered. So if you apply by November 1st, we get you a decision by November 30. It's a much smaller applicant pool than our large applicant pool. So, historically, we've fluctuated around 3,000 applications. This year, that number is going to be a little higher. But, the early decision pool is going to be significantly smaller. So, and the other benefit, of course, is that we haven't given out any offers of admission yet, right? So in November, we might give out some regular decision offers, but we focus first on our early decision folks. So that's one benefit, is that there are more seats. We have, we are looking to have a range of profiles, numerical profiles, geographic profiles, all those things, and none of those spaces have been filled with offers yet. And so I have the most flexibility at that stage. The downside, right, is I don't know what's coming yet. So that is the challenge, but we are generally not taking such a large number that's really kind of a big hindrance. So what we look for with early decision are people that are going to be really strong community members. And that may mean strong academically, but it may also mean strong in other ways. So maybe you are bringing a really rich, work experience. Maybe you've done, amazing work in your community. You're a community organizer. You're going to bring a different perspective, different life perspective, and that's something that is a type of student background that tends to really thrive at Davis and kind of fits well. And so, that may be someone that maybe numerically, if you apply later in the cycle, it's harder to stand out, because there's just so many applications as the cycle goes on. And as the cycle goes on, there's fewer offers to give. So someone, may stand out more, maybe more, easier for us to spot that person. The other benefit is, of course, that if you are admitted under early decision, that group of people are the only people who are eligible for our Select Scholars program, we have 4 scholarships. They go to someone who graduated from a UC, a University of California school, someone who has a public service background, anyone with kind of an interest or background in environment, and then STEM folks. So anybody in the sciences, mathematics, engineering, all of those. And we have 4 of those scholarships, and you are competing with a very small group of people for scholarships that you can that don't preclude you from getting consideration for scholarships and need-based grants later in the cycle when we consider all admitted students. So there's some definite financial incentives. However, because it is binding, I really only recommend it for people who are pretty sure that Davis is the right place for them. There is a little bit of time between the time we admit you and when you place that first deposit to kind of confirm that you're coming, but it's not much time. And so you really need to be sure. And we expect that once we tell you you're admitted, that you're going to withdraw your applications elsewhere. And so, you need to be pretty sure. But I think if you really want Davis seems like it's going to be the place for you. You're strong in terms of fit, and you can sort of feel comfortable, going somewhere without necessarily knowing, all the places that you might have had an offer. It can be really nice to be kind of done with the process by the end of November. Some of the students that I've had go through that program, all different kind of numbers, all different kinds of backgrounds, but they were just really sure that Davis was going to be the right fit for them. And they were just really relieved to kind of be done with it, before December. And it was nice. And they were able to kind of just focus on getting ready for law school, whether that was finishing out school or finishing out work. And there was kind of something nice about having things settled early on, were able to feel comfortable with their financial package as well, and didn't feel like they kind of walked in without any resources. So it's not for everyone, but I think it's a really attractive option if you have a strong interest in Davis, and you think that having that advantage of kind of being very early in the process will benefit you in terms of our overall pool, will help you stand out. It's a good option.
Yes, thank you for sharing about that program.
Sure.
Transitioning now into supplemental materials, I know we got a question about just other factors outside, maybe perhaps speaking to essays. As a general whole, what kind of factors, I know we talked about perhaps like a personal statement. I know that UC Davis includes diversity statement and resumes. What kind of personal statement, or how would UC Davis address students or direct them in what they're trying to answer or what they're trying to showcase?
Right, so we are definitely a school that has a very general personal statement prompt. We do encourage folks to talk about aspects of their background that would allow them to bring perspectives and experiences that aren't well represented. So if you've faced particular challenges, if you speak other languages, if you're an immigrant, if whatever, there's a lot of sort of backgrounds that aren't necessarily well represented in law school and in the legal profession. But so we do provide that in the prompt. But really what we say is share something about yourself with us. Share what you'd like us to know. And that's not meant to sort of make it harder for people to identify a topic. It's sincere. And so, we very intentionally don't ask you to tell us why UC Davis or why law school even. What I would like is for folks to sort of approach it as, if instead of writing a personal statement, you just sat down in front of me, and obviously in non-COVID times, but you sat down in my office and we just talked for 10 minutes and I asked you and just kind of said, so what's the deal? Who are you? What are you about? What would you tell me, right? What would you want me to know? What makes you tick? What gets you mad? What gets you, what makes you happy? What inspires you? What do you want me to know about you as a person that I can't find elsewhere in your application? That's actually the only question I want you to answer. I don't need you to I assume you must have good reasons for wanting to go to law school. And I very much assume you have a reason for applying to Davis. But that's not the most interesting piece of information for me. I really it tells me a lot what people choose to share about themselves as much as what they actually share, right? Just how they decided they wanted to talk about this part of their life or that part of their life. That's really, it's really helpful. And in some cases, unfortunately, it's also an example of maybe not so great judgment, right? We're not trying to trick you or anything, but it is a chance for you to really kind of speak to the committee as though you were having a conversation with them. And don't worry so much about trying to make a case for why you should be admitted, or to write what you think a good law school applicant would write. You should really write what it is you'd like us to know about you. If you choose to also write a diversity statement, that's great. Make sure they're not kind of essentially the same statement. If you want to expand on something in your personal statement in a diversity statement, but you certainly don't have to do it that way. It could be about a completely different part of you. Many people have, intersectionality is real, right? We all have multiple identities. And so you may talk about one aspect of yourself in your personal statement and another in your diversity statement. That's wonderful. Or, you don't have to include a diversity statement. It's completely optional. The personal statement is really the thing that we care about. So, make it your best writing, but make it your topic, your subject, your, information that you want to share with us. And, help us get a sense of who you are as a person, because, there are going to be, 7, 8, sometimes 9 people that read your application before a decision is reached. And that's a lot of different audiences. That's a lot of different people who are going to have an opportunity to connect with your story. But if it's not your story, honestly, it does come through in the writing. If you don't really care about your subject, it's probably not going to engage me as a reader. So I think you really need to think about what excites you, what gets you motivated, what do you want, what do you really want me to know? And I will probably be excited to read it if you can honestly say that, at the end of writing it and of course revising it a million times, you still are like, I'm really happy. This is what I'm about, or this is what I want them to know. If you feel that way, it will come through in the writing in a way that's something that's sort of, what you thought a law school applicant should talk about in a personal statement. It won't have that same quality. And I would much rather have the sincere kind of real sense of someone than sort of a sanitized, artificial, very generic sense of what you think law school applicants think and write. Be yourself and be confident that that has value.
I love that. I love just full transparency in personal statements and just sharing your uniqueness, your voice, and really making sure that it comes through in your writing. Speaking to one of our questions and something that I am always interested in knowing and understanding, what two consistencies that I've heard across the board for admissions committees in common mistakes to avoid would be number one, spelling errors, grammar errors, and just the distraction that it provides. And also inserting the wrong school. Because as much as I would think that it doesn't happen, I have heard from colleagues that I respect that unfortunately it has happened. But what is something or a few things that as an admissions committee member, when you're reading applications, if you see it, you go, oh no, not another one, or not this now. And so is there anything that comes to mind?
So the things you already mentioned are very, are the kind of things that, if you see it's sort of like one typo or one misspelling, right, it's not going to kill your application. It's sort of more when you see more than a sprinkling. That's when it becomes a distraction. I mean, sometimes the best, we're all human, right? We're going to sometimes make mistakes. Things like, I'm not a big fan of mentioning a school's name in your statement just to mention it. It really, honestly, it doesn't get you any points. So to eliminate the risk that you forget to change it on one, just don't include a school name, just say your school. We know that you're using the statement for more than one place, but you don't have to necessarily kind of rub it in our face, right? By forgetting to swap it out. And it's just one less thing to worry about. So they're, kind of those little things, yes, they are annoying. But what I would say kind of the bigger don'ts, things that they don't necessarily, count as a black mark, but I kind of, whenever I see them, I'm sort of sad for an applicant because I feel like it's a missed opportunity. And by that, I mean, sometimes I will see someone write a really beautiful story about someone in their life who is a source of inspiration for them. I derive inspiration from the people in my life, and it's always nice to learn about, someone's grandmother or their sibling or a teacher, whoever it might be. The problem becomes when the whole statement is essentially about that other person, and I don't really hear a lot about the applicant. So I've learned a lot about an amazing person in their life, and I can see why they're important, but I've learned nothing about the applicant, and they're the person that I'm evaluating for law school admission. So it's not really a mistake as much as a missed opportunity. So make sure that if you choose to write your personal statement about someone else, that you remember to, kind of give us enough backstory so that we understand why that person is important to you, but that you are the focus of the statement. So that would be one thing. The other one I will say is a little bit more of a nitpicky thing, but I am not a huge fan of using quotes from other people, like writers or from speeches. UC Davis is also known as King Hall. Our building is named in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so we do get a fair number of statements that include MLK quotes, either at the opener or somewhere in the statement. And, yes, his words were amazing and they're inspirational, but I really want to read the applicant's words, right? And so I think it's use that sparingly, if at all. Whatever the sentiment is that you're trying to express using someone else's words, really think about if there's a way that you can use your own words. Law is all about words. So the better you can become at expressing your thoughts and your, swaying people. You're going to be doing persuasive writing, all of those things, conveying a real message. You should do it with your statement, right? Like, you only have maybe 3 or 4 pages. So use all of your own words so that we can appreciate all of the richness and talent that you have with words and language, because that's such an important part of law school and being a lawyer. And when you use someone else's, it's a little bit of a shortcut. So I would say for me, that's one that those are the 2 that I kind of see where they're not mistakes, but I do think they're a bit of a missed opportunity for the applicant in terms of really kind of demonstrating their strengths.
Yes, I understand how perhaps utilizing another's gifts and skills would draw back from showcasing your own and elevating yourself in that personal statement. Staying, I guess, on the fun topic, were there any personal statement or diversity statement topics that perhaps are memorable to you or the committee, or that you would like to share that you still remember from previous years?
Sure. So let me see. I'm trying to think. So one, this was a number of years ago, but there was someone who, this applicant was a fan of tattoos. And whenever they had kind of a big life moment, they would get a tattoo to sort of commemorate, memorialize that moment in their life, that achievement or that experience. The applicant kind of used they kind of described their tattoos as a way of kind of sharing some really important kind of milestones and events in their life. And it was just kind of a nice way. It allowed them to jump around a bit in their life without kind of having a disjointed personal statement, because they were talking the ostensible topic of their statement was their tattoo collection, right? But they also, by virtue of kind of explaining each one, got to share a little bit. And so I thought that was a really interesting way to kind of share a bit about a different way to kind of share their journey, right? Their before law school life path. I read another one from someone who's on the kind of the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of kind of personality and life experience. Someone who was like did like data analytics, econ kind of consulting type of work. So very numbers, kind of a bit of a kind of a wonky sort of style of writing, very cerebral. But he was clearly very, that kind of work really, he was really into it. He really loved it and he was thrived on it. And he had worked on some big project, and there was some piece of it that they had issued this big report, and some piece of it got out into the press. And it was a report about like government spending. And so there was some portion in there where they had mentioned, they were spending like $18 on muffins per muffin for a conference or something like that. And so it had gotten picked up, one of those things where you hear about like NASA spends $200 for a bolt, right? Like those kinds of stories. And so he was talking very passionately about how hard it was to see all of this work they had done reduced to this kind of very one small piece of their report. And they kind of missed the bigger message, the bigger findings that they had. And so he was talking about it. And then at one point, what he did is he drew, he actually had in his personal statement, something I wouldn't necessarily recommend for everyone, but for him, it just fit, which is he had a Venn diagram, the circles, right? And so he had like the circle that was like all the information in the report, and then everything the press reported, and then the muffin was like the little sliver of the two that overlapped. And honestly, if someone had told me ahead of time, like, you're going to read this statement, someone's going to put a Venn diagram in it and you're going to love it, I'd be like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to love that. That's not going to work. That's the cheesiest thing ever. But it was very much the way that he thought, right? It was another way of representing things, and it absolutely fit with the style of his writing, the topic of his writing. It fit with what his experiences had been. I looked at his resume and I was like, of course this guy thinks about Venn diagrams. And the thing about it is, I could look, after I read it, I was like, I could actually envision that guy as, I might walk past the study rooms and he's the guy, they're studying for property, and he's drawing like a Venn diagram, in the study room whiteboard. And, you need that person. I had that person in my study group in law school. And I just really got a feel for that person, just as much as the tattoo person. They're totally different people. But I really got who they were. And so I could not, there were two completely different styles of writing, different topics, different people, but they were both equally effective because I think they were sincere and they really reflected that the applicant's perspective on the world and how they approach things and the way they saw things. And that was really exciting to kind of feel like we got a glimpse of the person that was going to come and eventually join our community. So those are ones that I remember. They're from many years ago. There's been many others, but those are two that I kind of think are nice examples because they're very different styles, but they were equally effective. And that really, it was that sincerity and that real sense of voice, in addition, of course, to being really well written, that made them stick in my mind years later. And so for me, those were two of my favorites.
I absolutely love both of those, and I applaud the initiative and just the brainstorming that those students went through, because that is absolutely amazing and it was successful. So I think that kind of showcases to students and to the students that might be tuning in later, how personalized it really is. And it doesn't need to be a cookie cutter statement that perhaps we may be thinking of in our heads. It really can be just your best foot forward in any way that best suits you. And then staying on personal statements, I did receive a question from a student talking about and speaking to, in their personal statement, directly writing how they, if it's a smaller school or it's perhaps not a T14 school, addressing specifically why a T14 school would not suit them and how they feel that they are a better fit for an individual school. So I guess the direction that I'm wondering is your thoughts on perhaps addressing what the student does not want to apply towards and how they best fit that school. I'm trying to work it into a question. So I guess any thoughts that you have on that?
So is this kind of the idea of like, maybe I'm someone that doesn't seem like a natural fit for your school because of whatever characteristics, and how can I kind of convey that I have a sincere interest in the school? Or
I believe so. And I believe, yeah, it was asking more towards, would it be appropriate to write in a personal statement, everyone wants to go to Harvard or a T14 school, but not me. Blank school has always been my dream school because of its closeness to my hometown and the community that I'm connected in. So I guess just speaking to how appropriate it would be to reference.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. One thing that we try to do on the admission side when people ask us to compare ourselves to other schools, as we say, we can't necessarily speak for another school, right? We respect our colleagues, we respect schools are different. There's many different types of personalities. Schools have different personalities, right? And so what we always do is kind of focus on what's great about Davis. And so I guess I would say, when you're trying to decide whether you need to kind of explain why you feel like you're a good fit for a school, or why you're not clamoring to go to, a top 10 school, right? I think you really just want to focus on why do you want to go to that school, and really kind of sharing the parts of yourself that will make it so that I might read it and say, oh my gosh, of course, this person is like an obvious fit for Davis. I mean, there are definitely applicants that I read and they are so strong, and I'm sure that they are getting into top 10 schools. And so I could read that application and I will not say that it's it's unprecedented that I might wonder, or someone on the committee might say like, well, I don't know, I mean, why are they applying to Davis? Like, they're obviously going to get into these other schools, right? Why are they interested? But if I can look at someone's application and really see how they fit, how we fit for them, okay, great. Well, maybe you did apply to those other schools and you get in, but I think you're a great fit for us, right? That's always the question that I have to ask. And so, I may be sort of not super optimistic about my chances of getting that student, but I would never sort of turn them down because I think that they, aren't really that interested in us, that we're just their safety or something. If I think that they could be really great here. And, there are sometimes students who on paper are exceptionally strong, but they're just not the greatest fit for us. And so we may not make them an offer. And, there's some space for fit to work both ways. So I think if you really feel like a certain school is a good is a good fit for you, even if maybe, the conventional wisdom would say you should be shooting higher in the rankings, or you should be going to the school that gives you the bigger award. If you really feel like that school is your fit, then, make sure that you are, you're sharing the parts of yourself and kind of helping us connect with you as well, right? That so we can see why you would be interested in us. And I see that, sometimes we have applicants who are really strong and they've done some amazing things, but it does kind of make sense for us. They would probably also be successful at other places, but we can read their statement, and they're really passionate about, maybe they're really passionate about immigration. Immigration is very strong at Davis, and they have kids and they want to live in a small town. And so there's just a lot of things that kind of say like, oh, well, Davis would obviously be a really good fit for you, even if I know that they're also maybe applying to and or would gain admission to a top 5 school or something. If I can see them at Davis the same way that I see someone who's maybe their numbers are not as strong or they're not as obvious a fit for a top 5 school, you're a fit for us. And that's all my job is to figure out people that are a fit for us. And so I think if you put together an application that puts out there the parts of you that make you a fit for a school, trust that we're going to pick that up, and you don't have to try to sort of convince us that you really do mean it. You really do want to come to our school. Like I said, I assume people have good reasons why they submit an application. So I'm going to take you at face value that you have a sincere interest in our school when you apply. And that's kind of, I assume that for every applicant.
Yeah, I think that hopefully that answered, and I reached back out to the student, their question.
Okay.
And speaking, we kind of went over different factors or different ways to showcase and consolidate just your personality into the statement. Going back to the numbers and academics of the application, in terms of the LSAT, I understand that UC Davis accepts multiple scores, but how does the committee view perhaps a trend? If we could talk about perhaps a decline or an increase, and then I have a following question, but we'll start there. I know there's a lot.
Okay, so like every law school, we will see all of the scores from the past 5 years, right? And we'll see an average. And although we see all of those to make an admission decision internally, we use the highest score. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that, if you take it multiple times, generally speaking, unless you kind of win in cold the first time, most people don't see significant score difference. Like just statistically, there's not usually a huge fluctuation. Some people do, but generally it's going to not make a big difference whether we use your average score or your high score. They're going to put you in I'm sure you guys have learned all about this, but like score bands, and they have the same predictive value, right? You can have a range of scores and they all kind of suggest the same, make the same prediction about how you'll fare in your first year. The other thing is that the LSAT is a snapshot of how you can think over a 3.5 hour time period, one day in your life. Okay, it's such a very specific and like discrete kind of thing that I don't see the point in sort of discounting because you did poorly on a previous test, or maybe you decide to retake it and you had a bad day. I don't see I'm just going to take you at your best day at this very kind of artificially constructed measurement tool that for the present time is the tool that we try to use to standardize the comparison about people's aptitude for success in our program, right? And so we just use the high score. We see them all. This year has been a little bit different in terms of seeing score changes. But again, we are going to use the highest score, and we're not going to sort of make, discount your score in the evaluation process. We're just going to take your scores at face value. And so whatever your high score is, that's the score we use to make an admission decision.
Thank you for that. Because I know a lot of students, and this is a big community for the LSAT, so we'd love to hear information from the point of view of the big people up there. And so I know we just got a question in, and something that I personally would advocate for is just contacting admissions And I guess addressing how that communication flows through. I know that that schools participate in the law school forums, and so you can contact them. And UC Davis, I know, offers 20-minute or 10-minute sessions that you can book with an admissions counselor. And so I guess the question that Alyssa submitted: when contacting admissions for questions after one has applied, what level of formality does that require? I see lots of your honorable school language with some of my peers. Also, I guess we could first start there, because there's a following question, and just about the language, because I know that students can be nervous contacting admission schools, especially their top school, when they're trying to do everything that they can.
Yeah, so so in terms of how to address folks, know that main admissions email address, it gets answered by all different people at different schools. At some schools, there is just one person, and they're like the person that answers the phone and greets people when they come in. You know, they're kind of like an assistant type person. At some schools, it might be the dean. So, you know, my predecessor, the prior admissions dean, she was the only one who responded to a lot of email that came in. I don't you know, during this pandemic, when we've been working remotely, we haven't had that position filled. And so there's a different person checking the email every day of the week. And so I check it one day, you know, the directors check it one day, someone who does, you know, so there's a range of folks. So I think just kind of using general professional courtesy, right? I think, you know, if you don't know the person who's going to be replying, you can always, you know, just address it generally. You can, you know, if you want to be very formal, you can use kind of to whom it may concern. You can write, you know, dear fill in the blank school, that's fine. Or dear admissions team, that always, I see that, that's fine with me. I mean, I think what's really, you know, make sure you proofread your emails. I mean, you should treat it as a piece of writing in the same way that you do any other time you're corresponding in your kind of professional and academic life. I think the other thing is make sure you read carefully the replies you get. Sometimes people will like fire off a reply really fast and they didn't actually read, or if we give you a link to something, they won't go to the link. They'll just fire back and ask another question. And it's not that we're, you know, don't want to answer your questions, just we've got, you know, a lot of emails and we put information out on our website to kind of help you. So sometimes we're going to direct you to that. We'll give you the nudge where to go, right? But, you know, you do need to kind of do that. I think the other thing to just remember is, you know, there are people answering these emails, especially over this past year. You know, you never know what's going on with people in their lives. And so just make sure you're always polite and professional. Generally speaking, I would stay away from like jokes and sarcasm in emails because it really doesn't always land very well. You know, you just don't know. And so I think it's better to err on the side of being you know, direct and professional and specific with what you need. If you have a question, you know, ask a specific question. It allows us to help you faster rather than kind of guess what it is you're asking. So in terms of, you know, kind of emailing just to email, I don't recommend that because, you know, if you don't actually have a question, then we just remember you as someone that just sent an email that didn't really do anything, right? But if you have a question, it's fine to tell, you know, to ask. But you know, like I said, just, you know, be mindful that these are, you know, real people who are answering you know, questions and doing the best they can and might be having, you know, things happening in their life too. So try to be, I know it's hard because it's a tough process to go through as an applicant. But you know, really honestly, most of the time, the folks that are replying to your emails are people who are answering the same question all day long, and it's fine because you know that's the job. But just, you know, kind of remember to be you know, to be kind and to be patient too, and know that everybody's trying to do their best. I honestly, I have not seen people be, you know, despite the stress everyone's under this past year, I have not seen applicants being, you know, especially rude or impatient or anything at all. I mean, there's occasionally jerks, but by and large, I've been very impressed with how professional and understanding people have been. If it maybe takes us a day longer to get back to someone, people are kind of understanding that the world is the world is a little bit tough right now. But you know, I think just be professional and specific about what you need, and we'll help you as best we can. So yeah.
That's awesome. I love hearing and continuing to hear that encouragement for students to, of course, have a purpose in their emailing, but if they do have a question, to consider how they're addressing it and to definitely reach out to the schools. Alyssa's second question, I guess, is speaking more towards the role that reaching out to schools or forming a bond with a specific admissions counselor, meeting with them consistently and asking them questions. I also have heard students speak to a relationship that they formed with the counselor that began with just an inquiry, and then over the months up into their application that they've actually formed over Zoom, I guess, a first name basis, but as much as one can. But I guess the question really speaks to what kind of role does that play? Do admissions counselors truly remember the students that will email them, or I guess just speaking to that in general?
I would say, we do remember. It depends a little bit on the person, which member of the team and what their role is, right? So for our frontline people, because the volume that they deal with is really high, they tend to remember the people at the extremes. So they remember the people that are very kind and, or maybe with whom they share some sort of random personal connection. They're from the same small town or whatever. And then they remember the people that were not polite or were kind of, misspelled their name every time they replied. Just kind of were not as great to them. And so, the person, who's our front person, they're not reading applications, but we're a team and we all talk, and so they will let me know if there's someone that's like, hey, I don't know. We do kind of want people to come into, we admit people to be members of our community, and that means not just our classroom community, but our school, our alumni community. We really want people to be part of our family, and so that is important to us, kind of how you how you conduct yourself in terms of working with an admissions, like an admissions officer, so a counselor or director, someone who's involved in the evaluation process. I think that again, anytime you communicate with us, it's helpful if you're specific about what you need. If you don't actually need anything, it's still okay to contact us, but just be, help us be responsive by just being specific and saying, I just wanted to check in. You don't need to reply. I just wanted to let you know that I'm, really excited. I saw such and such professor is, interview in the New York Times. I thought it was great. I know you're still reading applications and I just need to wait, but I just wanted to let you know. Like, those are fine. If you have a person that has said to you, email me when you apply, you should email them when you submit your application. Take people at their face value. I think that it's difficult, especially for schools that have really large applicant pools, to remember everyone we meet on the road. But that person that maybe follows up with an email when they apply, or maybe they're waiting and they just want to drop a line, that prompts us maybe to go and look up their file and see where they are in the process, right? And so maybe we see, oh, they've been waiting. I'll go ahead and I'll read that file and send it. It's not that you won't still move through the process, but I think if you contact us with a specific thing, or you tell us you don't need anything, you're just checking it, that can be a good way to kind of just let us know that you're still interested. It's respectful of our time, right, by telling us what you need or that you don't need anything at all. That's not the type of thing that is always going to end up as like an official piece of your applicant pile. But, if it's with a director or someone who's involved in the evaluation process, having some sort of rapport, if you end up on the wait list, that's always, a time that's good to check back in if you interacted with someone. I recommend following up with them if you get a waitlist decision, because sometimes it comes down for us. We have a short period of time to make waitlist decisions, and we just don't. We have a limited set of information, and so if I can say, I will ask my directors, hey, tell me who are your people on the wait list that you really like, right? We all end up connecting for some reason with an applicant or a collection of applicants over the cycle, and we all kind of get like have our favorites, people we were really kind of rooting for. And so sometimes that's helpful to know, yeah, I've talked to this person, they're really, they're great. Their application is good, but trust me, they are really gonna, thrive in our clinic program, or whatever kind of interaction or conversation you've had. So I think it can be helpful. Just be mindful of someone's time, and be specific about what you need or don't need when you contact them, so that they can be responsive and not sort of they don't want to dismiss you, but at the same time, recognize that at certain times of the year, the volume of correspondence is really high. And so it's helpful if you can kind of give us a direction and what you need and when. And if you don't need anything, but you're just saying hi, that's fine too. But don't send like long thesis papers, or don't send us extra things to read. We already have enough to read. So that would be my one thing. Please don't send me anything long to read. I can't read anymore. So yeah.
No, I definitely think it's good to be aware of who you're contacting and perhaps what they have on their load and their responsibilities. Speaking to scholarships, and I know we have a few more minutes. One thing that Solomon was wondering is what kind of factors are considered when offering applicants different types of scholarships, for example, conditional versus non-conditional scholarships during decisions.
Yeah, so for us at Davis, we don't have conditional scholarships. You just have to stay in good standing, meaning you can't fail out. We don't have, that's not an issue. We don't have academic attrition at Davis. But I think, what are schools looking at? So it would be disingenuous for me to not say your LSAT score and your GPA. Those are going to be important, but those are probably not going to be the only factors. Depending on the school, they may also be looking, at other aspects of your application. So, I mentioned earlier that we do have, we have our select scholars, where we're looking for applicants, admitted students with certain backgrounds, certain other experience, public service experience. We're looking for people who have, come from the sciences, those types of things. So we are going to look at those things. Most schools kind of either all of their scholarships have conditions, or none of them do. And so schools that have conditional scholarships, they have to tell you what those conditions are. And they actually have to publish that in their 509 information, which is that kind of 1 to 2, I guess it's 2 pages, kind of snapshot of the school's stats, and includes their financial aid information. So, but some things that I think are really important to make sure that is that, it's fine to contact a school and ask like, what their scholarship pool is like, right? So for us, the bulk of our money is used to award on kind of those traditional things. Like, we're going to look at LSAT and GPA, but we're also going to look at, we want to have a range of academic disciplines, and we want to have, some diversity in our class, right? But then we also have a collection of scholarships where the donor has said, we have these really specific criteria. We want these to go to a student from this type of background. So it's okay to ask a school too, are there other scholarships where it would be helpful for me to, submit a longer resume? Or are there any scholarships where I should apply, or, anything like that? Because sometimes if we don't have the information about you in your application, we can't match you with that scholarship, right? So, there are those kinds of things, but, it is going to be, we are going to be looking largely at kind of your credentials, right? So most law school applicants, the bulk of what you've done with your life thus far is be a student and take tests, right? So we're going to look at those as sort of the baseline. And those are going to drive, which I'm sure you guys know, that's why you're focusing on making sure you do really well in the LSAT. It just makes your life a little bit easier. But it's also important, I would ask about opportunities after you're already a student. So are there opportunities for new scholarships from the law school if you do really well your first year? Or are there other scholarships that are, dedicated? Are there other ways to reduce your cost of attendance, like TA positions or other types of campus employment. So you should ask those questions. Don't think of just the scholarship offer that you get or don't get as sort of at the end of the story for you for all 3 years. Really think of it as a 3-year investment. And so ask questions about what are the resources that are available to you as an entering student, but are there other things that will become available to you as a continuing student? Because usually there are some things that you can think about doing to reduce your cost of attendance in the future. So, which is really important. It does require a little extra work, but it's so important, trust me. Even like $1,000 less that you have to take out in student loans, you'll be so happy you did it. After you're out, you're graduating and you're repaying. I wish I would have done a little more work. It's okay. It all worked out fine, but I would have appreciated not being quite so lazy when I was in law school about looking for scholarship money after I was already in school. Would have been nice to have a few fewer student loan payments. Let's just say that. But it's an investment.
I've heard that consistently. The scholarships that add up and build up. And I have talked to Jocelyn. I have one final topic that I would love to hear you speak towards. I always hear advice from current law students and in how to handle the summer before law school. I know that some schools offer a prep program, and I've heard from current law students to take a vacation, tell your family you love them, go see your friends, because it is an enduring and you have to have real self-discipline when you're going through the first year of law school, as I can imagine. And so I understand that I don't understand how difficult it is. And so if you could, how would you advise students on handling that summer before, when everyone's nervous about fall and excited, wants to be successful, but also not burn themselves out?
Yeah, definitely. So what I recommend is the one thing that everyone can do, regardless of your financial circumstances or your life circumstances, probably everyone should be able to read and read for pleasure, but read read books, read something just a little bit meaty. It doesn't mean you have to read like War and Peace or some heavy tome. Read something you would enjoy, but you can read fiction, you can read history, whatever you like to read. But I really encourage getting in the habit of just reading a little bit every day, especially if you've been out of school for a little bit, because it's hard to make the adjustment to going back to that, depending on what kind of work you do. The other thing I would say is, think about, if you don't journal, maybe think about doing that, because again, it's getting in that habit of like writing and really thinking about language and sharpening your skills, your writing skills. That can be really helpful. In terms of, other things you can do, I absolutely echo, finding ways to kind of recharge. If you're fortunate and you have the financial means to take some time to travel or to visit family or friends, that's great. I know not everyone can do that, so find small ways to do that. If you can't, if you're not in a position to be able to take a trip to Europe or something really amazing, find ways to kind of recharge, because not only do you need to do that before you dive into law school, but I think you also need to learn how to find those things for yourself, because you're going to need to recharge during law school. There are going to be times where you're going to feel like you have hit empty, like there is nothing left in the tank, and you've got to find it from somewhere because it's not spring break yet, or it's you can't take a break, but you've got to find something that you can do kind of that's a little more internal, right? That helps you kind of, okay, reboot, I'm ready, I can do this, right? That resilience. And so I think, if you can sort of figure out what that thing is and what you're going to do to kind of help yourself stay healthy mentally and kind of spirit wise, it's really important. It was something I didn't really think about. And then when I got to law school, the first year was so stressful. I just really struggled. It was really tough for me academically. What I found was, once I found that I needed to make space in my life for something that kind of recharged me as a person, then law school was much more manageable, even when I had more things on my plate and more responsibilities, and I did better academically. So I think kind of making some time to figure out some way to recharge, over the summer and really kind of figure out what's going to be the thing that you're going to go to when you're having like a rough day or a rough week or a rough month. I mean, it happens. And what's going to be that thing that you can kind of go and do? Maybe it's like, you go to the dog park and, even if you don't have a dog, but you still love dogs, right? Like you just watch everybody else's dogs play and that makes you laugh and smile and you go for an hour, right? And then you can kind of go back, have that kind of range of things. Or when you're having a really bad day, okay, I need to get on the phone with my mom, or, find your like tools that are going to help you, and probably practice them over the summer. And then, like I said, from a practical standpoint, I think just like getting in the habit of reading every day and maybe writing, at least every week, do a little bit of writing just to get yourself back in the swing of being one with words, because it's going to be your life for the next 3 years. So, and honestly beyond. So, those would be my tips. Things that I did that I think were helpful, and then things that I wish I would have done because I think it would have made the first year a little bit easier. And my suggestions for entering law students.
I absolutely love that closure and your advice because I think it's so applicable. We have an upcoming study session that we're going to be doing for the LSAT. And so I think it can be applied really in any scenario in life, and especially the LSAT, and how grueling sometimes studying can be and the frustration that you face. So I hope all the students, I loved the conversation. Thank you so much for sharing. And I could continue to ask questions because they keep coming. And I wanted to say once again, thank you for your time. I know that it's busy in the office, it's busy in life and in the world. But I hope that the students found it as helpful as I did, and we'll continue to share that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and feel free to reach out. You just go to the UC Davis website, and I'm happy to connect if you have more questions in the future. And good luck with the LSAT. Remember, it's just a test. It's not everything in the world. You will get to where you want to go and be successful. So, but good luck with everything. You're doing the right things by studying and reaching out for resources. So good luck to everybody. And thanks for having me again.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.